All right, so as I was saying a moment ago, you should read the departmental syllabus. Yeah, obviously, especially if you take a lot of classes in the same subject matter, we use similar stuff and we keep blasting at you over and over again, so you skip over it because you've already read it. One of the things that I added this semester to our departmental syllabus, which means like all the people who teach microbiology have it in their departmental syllabus, is some services on campus that are really crucial to you guys. So there was unfortunately a student I helped today who showed up to class with a baby. Can you do that? No, right? The student handbook states you cannot bring children to class, right? Most syllabuses, including my departmental one, I'm sure it's listed on there, you can't bring children. They're not old enough for college. Right? There's multiple other reasons to why this is not where they should be. We do have an excellent child care center here on campus. Are you guys aware of that? Right. So it's kind of hidden, right? It's over by the ball fields, but towards the front of campus. It's called the Joey Georges Child Care Center. It's state-of-the-art, brand new, built after Katrina. It's great. My son went there for a year before he entered into school, because by the time they finally built it, you know, he was older than just a little one. But he loved it. I loved it. It was great to come to work and just drop him off, go to work, pick him up, and if something happened, I was close by. And then, you know, for some people, money can be an issue to pay for those types of things, right? So the other thing we have, which is in this building, right below us actually, over that way, is a place called Single Stop. Anyone ever heard of that? And that's the new thing that I added this semester. They provide assistance with getting access to lots of free services, including help with childcare, federal assistance for childcare, food accessibility, shelter. They do free taxes pretty soon. They'll file your taxes for free. Huh? It started already. Yeah, it's June. Even faculty could use it, I found out recently. I was like, oh, I might have to do that. I just got to convince my husband to not use our expensive account. I don't think I might win that one, but you know, it doesn't hurt to try. So they even have food pantry, or they call it something else, the care corner, because people don't like the negative connotation that some people put on food pantry. Yeah, it's freaking food. And it's free. If you need it, go get it. And a lot of times, like, if you come up the scary spiral staircase, which I won't, because it scares me, there are other stairs, by the way. I found it in the other building, right, when you go through the other part of this building, when you go through the double doors, a pair of stairs right there. Yeah, it's great. Other than the two down here at the front of the building, which are usually the ones, if I'm coming from that side, I would enter through. I can't, it's down that's really frightening, because if you follow the right-hand, left-hand rule, right, you end up at the small side of the staircase. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'd be falling down. But they're right down there, and sometimes they put free food out for anybody to walk by and take, you know. Most of the time it's been stuff I can't eat, but, you know, hey. When one time they put Cokes out there, I mean, they were gone. By like 8:30 in the morning, they were like gone. Those little packets of mini muffins and stuff. I can't eat that either, but you know, you guys probably could. So you know, you might want to kind of go that way. It was like peek and see if there's any freebies. And definitely, you know, it's housed at Delgado, but it's not a Delgado service. It's a nonprofit organization, and the ladies in there are just wonderful, you know, and they're well trained, and they really just want to help people, you know, which is great. So, yeah, if you need help with anything, it doesn't hurt to ask, right? Go check it out. So I sent her to Joey and sent her there to help her get the childcare thing situated. So we have some great services here. Communication at Delgado, as you know, isn't always the easiest thing, right? But we try. We're working. So if you're having trouble, remember, with certain things, everything for the course is under modules, right? And right? So here's even a link that shows you how to download stuff from this site. So if you want to download the PowerPoints or any other documents I post for you guys, and how to go through the beginning steps for Wiley Plus registration. It was insanely easy, right? We did that last time. And this is for checking your compatibility. Then after that, if you watch these, you can click this link or even this link. Both of these are going to go to Wiley Plus. This one always is going to take you to the ebook, right? Which at some point everybody will have it, whether it be free or you paid for it or the code with your book, right? I caution you, don't buy the book someplace else and they say it comes with a code. Usually the code doesn't work. We found that out, right? If you buy it, say, on Amazon, right, that code might not actually work. So you have to buy it separate. Did I talk about cache and cookies last time? Do you guys know what that is on computers? Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out. It sounds good, but apparently it's not, right? And so if you need help with that, you click on that before you contact Wiley support. Make sure that's not the issue that you're having. And then otherwise, connect them. And then assignments are going to be in the modules. And so, oh good, I didn't put it there yet. Good. So this is where the it gives you a little bit more focus on the readings too. Which, as I said, by next time, everyone will answer yes to that question, right? You're going to start reading because you can access this for free for 14 days. You have no reason not to do it. Money's not the issue. Accessibility to the internet might be, but that's, you can go to McDonald's and Burger King now and get on the internet. So, and Computer Lab's right there. So, this is your study guide, right? So it's just the objectives on one document. And then the PowerPoint, we list the objective and then we go over it, right? And that's the way it's all semester long. What do I test you on? The objectives. So you guys may have noticed too, and I'll go back to that I set up all the exam dates, right, as promised. And locations, because remember I said we're not actually going to do them in the classroom because we're going to take them on the computer. So 1, 2, and 3 are going to be in the computer lab. Called the Hibernia Center in Building 1, room 108. It's right next to Einstein's Bagels, if you're familiar with layout of Building 1. The Crystal Andrews that runs that, she's awesome. They're so awesome in there. I love that place. So you'll log on to Canvas, because remember I told you guys make sure you know your password for that, right, so that you can log on. We'll use a special program that locks down the computer so you can't search the web and cheat. Called Lockdown Browser. They have it installed on those computers. I was not Johnny on the spot because I was distracted with other things at the beginning of the semester and did not get in there for final exams. But I have friends. Building 7, which is where the library is housed and what they call a Student Resource Center, or Martin Thalmus Hall. It's right behind Building 1 next to Building 1 Annex on that side. It's the newest building on campus.
It's the one that has library and big libraries on it.
It actually has library and big libraries? Maybe on its little sign coming from this direction it might, yeah. So it's awesome new state-of-the-art library. Y'all go check it out. I was there Friday because there was a fire alarm in Building 1. So I escaped to one of the study carols. Like they have group study rooms with technology and all kinds. You can reserve and get together with your buddies from this class even and study together. It's awesome. I mean, and the librarians are like my besties. They're great. So yeah, I spent the only problem with those rooms is if you don't move or you don't sit in the right spot, the lights keep turning off on you because it's on a sensor, right? And if you don't move enough, sometimes that happens in these classes if I don't have fidgety ADD or like me, right? And all of a sudden we're also still, the lights go off. That's because they're on motion detectors, and if there's no movement over a certain period of time, the lights go off. Somebody just needs to move. But I get tired of moving on Friday. But great place. They have computer rooms there. I reserved one for this class right there in that building when you walk in from Building 1. So you'll notice that says Building 7, room 160. But I'll remind you guys, remember to, if it helps you, put these in your calendar, put them in your phone, whatever you've got to do to remember these important dates. And we'll pretty much stick to them because I had to reserve a room, right? So I got to keep to the schedule. Which means, shut up, Erica, and move on to the lecture. But Wiley plus assignments will be right in the modules for that. And I didn't deploy the first one yet because we haven't covered any material, right? And I'm going to do a recording, a separate recording, because I think it would be beneficial, and maybe my ADD will be under control. Of how best to use those assignments, right? And so I'm glad I haven't turned it on for you guys yet, because I don't want you doing it before you've studied. I actually want you to treat them as if they're quizzes. But the good news is guess what? You can keep doing it until you get it right. And I even let it tell you the correct answer. So you'd have to be like lazy beyond lazy to not get a perfect score on these assignments. Okay? But if you don't use them the way I suggest, then you're not going to get the best benefit out of them either. Right? So I'll talk about that in a separate one. Right? I'll post it for you guys, and we'll maybe, I'll keep talking about it in little spurts. Good? All right. Woohoo. So no assignments just yet. And now we're going to go to lecture. So did anybody watch, because no one missed class, right? Anybody here that wasn't here the first day? I did forget to ask that. So you up to speed, or do you need to meet with me after class? Did you watch the video I posted? You did not. Okay. All right. So it was mostly just like the technology and syllabus stuff. So make sure you do that. And then come see me if you have questions. So all my lectures, as I said, I record and I post on YouTube, and I link it to Canvas. But you can subscribe to my channel, and you'll just get them notifications when they get posted. You don't have to wait on me to put the links in Canvas. Which, depending on the day of the week, is going to be sometimes that night. But usually I try to get it done that day. So our very first topic is microbiology. So, of course, just like most classes, right, we start out in the first chapter, an introduction into the topic. What I usually like to do in the beginning is kind of start out with some things that are relatable for us. And so one of the first objectives we'll cover in a second is being able to relate specific diseases to the information related to them. Before we get to that, microorganisms, right, tend to get a bad rap because of the diseases they cause, right? But in fact, life on this planet would not be possible without them. And considering they're microscopic, right, it's very easy for the first condition to be met, right? That there are pretty much more of them than anything else. They're the most abundant life force on this planet. And you can find them just about everywhere. I mean, literally everywhere. Can any of you guys think of an example of an environment where most living organisms aren't there, but there are microorganisms? Water? Deep sea? Top of Mount Everest, yeah, in ice. Right? In really hot places, volcanic vents in the ocean. There are microorganisms that grow at that really high temperature. Yellowstone National Park, right? All those hot springs, all those pretty colors, microorganisms growing. Right? Really salty places, right? I mean, pretty much you name it. If there's a food source and they can survive and eat it, they will. They will. And then we already know as it relates to our lives, they really are everywhere. So as it relates to your day-to-day living, where can you find microorganisms? On your PlayStation 4, which you wish you were on right now. In your kitchen, right? On your countertops. In the air we breathe, right? On our skin. In our intestines, which ends up in our poop, right? Everywhere. Literally everywhere. In general. Right? They play a major role. This is why I say we can't live without them. They recycle nutrients on the planet. So in your book, in chapter 1, they go into a little bit more detail. Pretty sure they do nitrogen cycling, right? So nitrogen is an element that's necessary to build the building molecules of our bodies. And I'm not going to go over some of the stuff in chapter 1. I'm not even going to test you on it. But if you don't know or understand it, this course is going to be difficult. And this stuff is prerequisite stuff you should have covered in some other biology class so that you know we don't not really waste time, but bore some of us. When I was in undergrad, you get to like 400 level classes, right? And my nutrition teacher started out with cell biology, like the structure of a cell, what's in it. Yeah, I was like, dude, move aside, I got this. I'm like, over this. I've got it done. But proteins, right? And again, like this is stuff even my 9-year-old son knows, right? You know, that proteins are important and sugars are bad, and how to read a nutritional label, right? And sort of what this stuff means and why this stuff is important as it relates to the cells that make up our bodies, which, you know, bacteria are cells too, right? So they comprise of all of these same things. You should have learned about this in biology. Like everyone should know what DNA stands for. What does it stand for? Right, yeah. But then even maybe a little step further, anyone know like what smaller molecules go together to build those nucleotides that make up DNA? There's a sugar, a phosphate. Oh, it's starting to come back, right?
And a nitrogenous base.
And a nitrogenous base, which gives it that code that we use, right? Those nitrogenous bases are the A's. Yeah, it's covered in chapter 1. Read over it. If then you're like, oh my God, biology did not stick with me, then you come see me, and we'll cover it. Right? But I'm not gonna like do it in the entire class, okay? But don't feel that you can't. And the Science Resource Center, they've been going into the labs and stuff. You guys know about the Science Resource Center? Another thing in the departmental syllabus. Excellent place. Ask for Erin. She's taken my microbiology classes. She's great. She loves micro. There's a bunch of other stuff. Really energetic tutor. Loves helping. So she's one you could seek out if you're having difficulty, especially in biology and microbiology. There's lots of people that go there for chemistry and physics because, you know, who doesn't, right? Need help with that. And anatomy and physiology, like, will consume the lab sometimes, but they have 2 rooms. So, go. Right? Make use of them. You pay for it in your student fees, right? So, why not go? So, that recycling of nitrogen. So, nitrogen's needed to build some of those molecules. Anyone know which ones? This we are going to cover later. So if we're going to build a cell, we need things like sugars, right? All that stuff on the nutritional label. Proteins, fats, nucleic acids. But they don't list that, right? But if you're eating cells, whether it's plant or animal, by the way, you're getting them. So which one do you think needs nitrogen? Anyone know? Proteins. And nitrogenous, the nitrogenous bases, right? You hear nitrogen in its name, right? That make up nucleotides that make up things like DNA and RNA, right? So you've got to have that nitrogen. But that nitrogen is in gaseous form in the atmosphere. But the unfortunate thing is we can't just suck it in and like turn it into proteins. It doesn't work that way. What actually happens is that's converted by microorganisms in the soil, and ones that actually will live in conjunction with the roots of plants to convert that nitrogen into a usable form that the plants can use. And then I guess animals eat that, right? Whether you're a vegetarian or not, that animal or the animal before it, at some point some animal ate what? A plant. and that's how, right, we get the building blocks. But for that whole system to work too, then like when we die and plants die, right, and we get decomposed back into soil, guess who does that? Who breaks down all of that back into soil? Microorganisms. So then photosynthesis, hopefully maybe remember from biology, maybe sort of kind of, right? So what is needed for photosynthesis? Sunlight. And it's used to convert what into what? Carbon dioxide. One more. Carbon dioxide and one other thing. Water. Into sugars. What does it give off? I heard it. Oxygen. Plants, though, can also use oxygen. So just as much as they produce, they use. So where do we get our oxygen? She's got the theme going. Microorganisms, right? So cyanobacteria and algae that live in our oceans are photosynthetic, right? Just like plants, but they overproduce oxygen. They produce more than they use, right? That creates the excess to make life possible for organisms like ourselves that rely on on oxygen. Pretty cool, huh? So yeah, we got to kind of take care of them too. They're source of nutrients that carry out photosynthesis. Okay, we use them in food production. Anyone can think of some foods that are made because of microorganisms? Cheese, right? All those things we ferment, milk products, and turn it into buttermilk, yogurt, these types of things. I couldn't think of cheese last week. So thank you for remembering it. I love cheese. So that process, that fermentation process, is a metabolic process by microorganisms in that milk that convert it into what we know as buttermilk, sour cream, cheese. You know, different organisms create the different cheeses. And sometimes it's bacteria, sometimes it's things like fungi, mold, right? Blue cheese, that's a mold, right? Actually growing right in the cheese, that blue stuff. Yeah. It's edible though. And that's actually a penicillin. But people who are allergic to penicillin can eat it because it doesn't produce penicillin under those conditions. That's a product that organism produces, which jumps ahead to antibiotics. So I just said microorganisms produce antibiotics. Most of us are aware of penicillin, right? And what does it come from?
Mold.
A mold, right? Known as penicillium.
You just said that.
Yeah, I did. So it's a mold. It produces this compound we know as penicillin, right? It secretes it, and it kills what? Why do we take antibiotics? Kill what type of infection? What microorganism are we? Bacteria. When you have a bacterial infection. Can you take antibiotics to a viral infection? No, because they, for the most part, target bacteria. We have antivirals, right, for some viruses. Okay, so antibiotics actually come from microorganisms to fight other microorganisms. In the case of penicillin, the mold fighting the bacteria. What are they fighting over?
Your body, territory, food.
Right, the same things people fight over. Territory, food, resources, right? And so the mold is like, no, this is my food, this is my house, you get out of here, right? And so it's chemical warfare. We've stolen their technology. That's all we've done now with antibiotics. It's stolen technology. And we've even modified it. We've taken penicillin and chemically modified it into a whole bunch of other cillins. Amoxicillin, ampicillin. Those are modified from the natural form of penicillin. And they work a little bit differently because we chemically modified it. Right? There's like gazillions of cillins, right? They're all related. Kind of cool, huh? So, are we running into a problem, though, with antibiotics? We're starting to run out of them, right? Because do the bacteria stay the same? No, they change. And they mutate. And they get stuff that makes the antibiotics not work anymore. Or they change in such a way the antibiotic doesn't work anymore. So we end up things like people call MRSA. It's an acronym, y'all. MRSA. What does it stand for?
Some sort of staph infection.
Right. So mictillizin, which is a penicillin, it's a very common drug that was given for infections with Staphylococcus aureus. So it's micticillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, right? So when they say staph, they're just abbreviating the name of the most common offender of those types of infections, which is Staphylococcus aureus. This organism is prevalent in our environment. Most of us are carriers. We carry it in our nose. So you could sneeze on your own wound and infect yourself and cause a staph infection. Right? The bad news is if you acquired the strain that is resistant to penicillin-like drugs, you can't take them. They're not going to work. Right? The bacteria is resistant. Another misnomer out there, people think they become resistant. No. You don't become resistant. The organism you're fighting becomes resistant. So guess what we have now since we had so we've got that resistant strain. So we got to switch to another antibiotic, right? This one starts with a V. Anyone know what V stands for in antibiotic world? Vancomycin. We have VRSA now. Vancomycin resistant strains of Staphylococcus aureus. Will this list continue? Absolutely. Are we going to get to the point where we run out? Already got there, right? A couple months back. Woman had an infection. All known antibiotics not effective against that bacteria. All currently available. Kind of frightening, huh? So there's an initiative actively, like having high schools and colleges in their microbiology labs try to find new antibiotic-producing bacteria, whether it be a new bacteria or a change in the bacteria that has evolved a new antibiotic. And some are even looking at it in course of fungi, because that's where some of them come from, like penicillin. So, yeah, it's a real problem. But we get confused, like when a lot of times like, well, but I take an antibiotic for a microbial infection. How could it come from a microbe? Well, it does, right? That's what it actually means. Vitamins, right? Whether you buy them at GNC or you eat a well-balanced diet, guess who's making those vitamins? Microorganisms, right? So in GNC, it's being done in the lab and purified and put in pill form. If you eat a well-balanced diet, the microbes that are in your intestines make them for you. As kind of a thank you for giving me the food you didn't eat and a place to live. And you kind of need those just a little bit, kind of, sort of. Right? But some of us, we take supplements because we can't eat a well-balanced diet because we're just stubborn. Right? In my case, it's mostly stubborn. Okay, but what do we focus on the most, right? We don't talk about the fact that, antibiotics are because of them, or vitamins are because of them, or we can breathe because of them, right? We focus on the bad stuff, right? What they can do to us, make us very sick, and even potentially kill us. So this first objective is to associate selected pathogenic microbes with specific infectious disease. So I told you the test is on the computer, right? What format do you think? What type of question format? Multiple guess, yeah. I like that term. Hopefully you're not guessing, right? It's multiple choice, right? What else? True, false. Not everybody's favorite. I do try to not have too many of those. Okay, what's another one? Matching, right? For this objective, which would you think this would lend to? Which is more likely to matching? Associate, match up. You see? Okay. Any short answer? Fill in the blank where you actually have to type? Essay? God, no, I'd have to grade that stuff. No. Don't do that anymore. We do discussion boards, right? That's where we practice writing in this class.
Do the labeling one?
Low stress. Yes, I will do labeling and diagramming. But again, it's, match from choices. And I don't do the evil matching where there's more choices than there are. It literally matches. Like, if you have 5 things, you have 5 choices.
I just don't like the scrolling for labeling. Whenever you have to scroll up and down, like they have a picture, and then they have all these questions with like the...
Oh yeah, mine's usually formatted well enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But that's a good point. Because then you're like...
Yeah. It usually causes more problems.
Oh,
I'm
it's weird.
curious.
Yeah.
Mentally preparing.
That's awesome. Do you guys understand what she was asking? Because it might be an important point for some of you guys. If I have any labeling things where you have a picture and then you have to make choices down below, I usually make it so that it will all fit on the computer screen so that you're not scrolling up and down. Or in the case, though, if you blow it up, though, that won't be the case. So we'll talk about that. All right. Okay. So, I gotta talk to my librarian friends. My boss warned me about copyright. I take stuff from the internet, right? I've been told that if you're using it for educational purposes, I'm not profiting off of this other than my usual salary. My YouTube channel does not make me any money, right? I do that for the convenience for my students, not to become a YouTube sensation. I don't see it ever happening. But I've been bad in the past about not documenting where I get stuff from. So like this diagram's not in your book. I got it from the internet. That's the web link where I got it from. I don't claim that it's mine. I'm borrowing, sharing, whatever you want to call it, legally. Okay, so most of us know in general how diseases spread, right? And how to avoid these things. So under general transmission, things can be carried in the wind, in the water, right? You can inhale things like spores that we're going to talk about. The worst case scenario is bacterial spores known as endospores. You can get entry into your skin. You can even have things introduced to you by animal vectors. Some of the worst vectors that we're not so fond of are the ones it's much harder to avoid. I'm guessing this is a bird, right? And this is a cute little mousey. Those are relatively easy to avoid, right? Contact with. The mosquitoes and the fleas things, maybe not so much, right? And they bite you, right? And they can transmit disease to you. And we know this, right? And living in Louisiana, there are certain things that we worry about as it relates to, and then there's new things all the time, right? Zika, right? Don't panic about Zika, by the way. There's sometimes why, certain people will. I had the state epidemiologist who came and gave us a talk last semester. And I kind of knew this already. It's like, the media and other outlets and stuff kind of hype some of these things. And especially scientists. I mean, we're not doing this to be bad, but we have to hype things in order to get funding, in order to research things. You see? This vicious cycle. So it isn't like insane, like you need to stress out about this, but it kind of seems like that at one point in the media, right? And even the professionals will contribute to that paranoia because it gets them what they need. So, don't freak out. And usually, like, my students in these classes become germaphobes, right? Microorganisms, we started out with good, right? Don't forget the good page. Don't forget about the good page, right? They can be good. But we know that disease can be transmitted by animals, by these vectors of mosquitoes and fleas and stuff like that, and that we should avoid when at all possible, right, exposure to these things because they can make us very sick and even kill us. Direct contact, these are usually pathogens that, what does pathogen mean? Known to cause disease, right? So when we're talking about something like we know hepatitis or herpes viruses cause herpes, right? We know Ebola virus causes Ebola. We know HIV, human immunodeficiency virus causes, right? It's just an acronym again, right? Sometimes we forget what it stands for. These types of things you have to have really intimate contact with somebody. Kissing, right, which is basically swapping spit. My husband's lucky I actually do that. Right? Things like blood, right? And that's why even in some religions, like, Jehovah's Witnesses won't get blood transfusions because obviously at some point, right, they realized that blood was bad or could be bad, right? The problem is that belief hasn't been walked away from under scientific proof that sometimes it can be good. And sometimes it's literally necessary for life. I definitely agree with not doing it if you don't have to. Like, if you choose to get electric surgery, which is kind of crazy, why would you choose to get surgery if you don't have to get surgery? But my mom wanted her jaw fixed. So it was somewhat cosmetic, but it was also a pain issue. So she had it broken and reset. They took her blood and gave her back her own blood, because they knew that it was going to happen. But if you're having emergency surgery, right, and you may need blood, you may need it to actually live through that surgery. So in that case, it could be medically necessary. And I'll tell you right now, the blood bank was like calling me all the time. I donated blood once, and then I found out that I have really low blood pressure because I almost passed out. It was not pleasant. So I like, unless someone's going to drive me to the blood center and like take care of me for the rest of the day, I don't donate blood. But I have O positive, so they're like, please come. Right now they really need it. And if you really can do it on a regular basis, please do, because you could save up to 5 lives, right? Because there's so much more they do with your blood than just blood transfusions. There are people who need platelets. It's just all the stuff in your blood is amazing. It's amazing. But it could be bad stuff in there too. So of course they screen for everything they know about, right? But there was a time we didn't even know about HIV and people got it from blood transfusions, not from any of the other intimate acts that can transfer something like that. So most of us are aware of those types of risks, right, at this stage of our life. Indirect contact too, right? We know if somebody with flu sneezes on the doorknob, you touch it, you touch your face, right, your nose, eyes, mouth, then it could be transmitted to you. and that you want to avoid these things. Respiratory droplets. When you talk, right, there are small particles of water that could contain microorganisms that get released into the air. So have you ever experienced what I call a face talker? You know what that is? They talk in your face, right? So they're like spitting all over your face. Yeah, the problem with that is when you back up, they just keep coming, don't they? So this is what you do. You put your hands up. It works every time, right? You create that safe zone for yourself, right? Where you feel comfortable and microbiologically much better. Dorms in barracks, right, for military are actually, spaced a particular distance to try and help stop that type of transmission, respiratory droplet transmission. But, there's only so much you can do. But yeah, face talking, not a good idea. If you're a face talker, figure out how to fix that habit, right? Your friends and everyone else will love you for it. Airborne. So there are some things, unfortunately, can really survive in the environment for long periods of time. They can become aerosolized. People who spit drive me nuts, but I don't say anything to most people who spit because I'm afraid they'll shoot me. This is apparently a real possibility. If you spit and you have, say, something like tuberculosis, and you spit on the sidewalk, that can become aerosolized. And tuberculosis, as little as 10 bacteria, if someone else inhales, they'll get that infection, especially if they're susceptible to it. And then also with tuberculosis, we've got a real problem with antibiotic resistance, right? So it's just crazy. Swallow it. You really are meant to swallow it. And if you absolutely can't, spit it somewhere where someone else isn't going to be readily exposed to it, right? Napkin, trash can, right? These types of things, right? Fecal oral. This is one no one likes to talk about, right? This is where you ingest something, right? And your intestine is just a hollow tube through your body, right? So it goes in one ear and out the other. For some things, that really is the case, right? Corn. It's a cell. If you don't bust that by chewing it, that kernel of corn, if it's intact, goes in one end and right out the other end. You don't have any enzymes that can break cellulose, which is what makes up the cell walls of plants. You don't digest it. It's what we call fiber, right? Yeah, in one end, out the other, right? Kind of helps with that if you're having problems getting that stuff to go, right? But, so things that you ingest, right, can end up in your intestines, and then they get put into your fecal matter, right? And then if someone else is exposed to that, it re-enters, right? And we've got this cycle, okay? So can you guys handle a gross out this morning, or is it a no? Okay, all right. We're in micro. It's going to happen, right? So one of my students in the past wasn't watching his little toddler too closely. Comes back into the room, and he's eating his own poop. Yeah, he was like, he didn't get sick. And my student was like, how is this possible? I'm like, well, he just put it where it came out, back in. As long as you don't put it anyplace else, it doesn't create a problem. Us girls know there's a problem with poop, right? And the whole location of two holes as it relates to the anus, right? So what's in front of the anus, ladies? Vagina and urethra. When you're a little girl, someone teaches you must wipe from front to back. You do not want to wipe poop into vagina or urethra, right? So guys, did you tune me out? Wake back up. Because someday you might have to take care of a little girl, and she will die, I kid you not, from something as simple as not wiping properly. It has happened. In Louisiana even. Little girl, several years back, they linked back the infection that killed her to her own normal flora, and that she was not wiping properly. Right? Got into her urethra, spread to her kidneys, damaged her kidneys so much so that when the parents went for help, it was beyond help. So we laugh about it, right? Poop talk is hard, but it's serious, right? These microorganisms are fine in our gut. It's when they get places they're not supposed to go, right, that they create problems. So believe it or not, yeah, you could. I'm not eating my own poop, but animals do this all the time, right? They eat poop for several different reasons, right? For some of them, it actually is to acquire the normal flora. So, like, cows and horses, they eat their mom's poop on purpose. When you give birth to your child, as it goes through the birth canal, it picks up your normal flora, right, from your vagina. When you breastfeed, they pick up even more. So people who do cesarean or don't breastfeed, that whole talk about probiotics is probably something you would want to consider for that child to help them establish. I mean, they get it from the fact that they put everything in their mouth anyways, too. But you might want to be selective as to what microbes get in there. And there are other benefits to those types of things. The other interesting thing the research seems to be leading is that, think about it, when you take something orally, like a probiotic, when it gets to your stomach and your small intestines, your body digests it as if it's food. So if it's a microorganism, it gets broken down as food, okay? So depending on the number and how it's encapsulated, it might not actually make it to the large intestines where these things live. So your best bet, and of course nobody's signing up for this readily, is actually to take what? Yeah, edema. Go up the other way, right? Introduce the microorganisms directly into the colon. Yeah, I know. All of us are like, yeah, no. Eat a well-balanced diet. Can't say that enough. All right, so then we get to these. So these are just some selected diseases. I do have a typo I'm going to let you guys know about, and I'm going to try and fix for the next go-around that a student of mine pointed out. Remember, I'm dyslexic, so sometimes I screw up. But actually, a student put together these slides for me, and so they messed up, and I didn't catch it. And the other day, I sort of caught it. I was like, that's not right. But then I forgot about it. That's ADD for you. Didn't write it down. So it's on the next slide. So remind me, Miss Erica, what's spelt wrong? Although you're gonna have to spell in this class. No, matching, true and false, right? And when you do have to spell, you could spell check in your discussion boards and stuff like that, because we do actually want to know what you're trying to say. So usually you have to spell it correctly. Which, by the way, Siri is me and my son's best friend. She spells, by the way. She's awesome. You have to enunciate, though. You have to enunciate, but she'll spell. We try and figure it out first, and then we use Siri. Okay, and the internet. So I covered up some of these diseases because I want to see if you guys can figure it out by some of the attributes. Sometimes I attempt to change this, but I think it's good for you guys to learn some terminology that you may or may not use in your future. So etiological agent. Anyone know how you would describe this or another name you would give to this? So when we talk about disease, right, we want to know what causes it. So it's the causative agent. So what's causing this particular disease? And nowadays, for a lot of diseases, we know if it's caused by a particular bacteria or a particular virus. Or in this case, one of the organisms we have on this list is actually a eukaryote. It's a protozoa, right? It's a single-cell eukaryotic organism that can cause an infection. So when we name organisms, and that's another thing I probably need to fix on here, is that typically when we write out the name of an organism, how is it written? It's italicized, or if you're handwriting it, you underlined it. You underline it. What else? So this is Bacillus anthracis. So, the name is the disease, isn't it? See how that? What's the disease? It's anthrax. Yeah, it's anthrax. So that's the bacteria that causes it. So what do you know about its name? It has two names, Bacillus anthracis, right? What do we call that first part of the name?
The shape.
No, it is the shape, though. This one is
twofold.
twofold. Right? So you're a Homo sapien, and she's right. That's the genus, right? The next part is the species. But actually, when we say species names, we include the genus and the species, right? We don't just say the species; we say both. So that we use what's called the the binomial naming system, right? So they're kind of like us. They have a first and a last name. But we also write that in a particular way. Do you guys notice something about it? So when you write a name, you do what? You capitalize the first letter, right, of proper names. So we capitalize the genus, but do we capitalize the species? No, we do not. We do not capitalize the species, right? So when you see two names, you see the first one capitalized, right? We're usually talking about an organism, right? A living organism. Are viruses living? Most scientists will say no, right? And their names don't follow this naming system because they're not classified the same way. But the good news is their classification or their names usually include what? The word virus. So that makes that really easy, right? So what are Brucella melitensis and Bartonella henselii. What do you think those are? Do you think they're bacteria, viruses? Bacteria. They're bacteria, right? Because again, the two naming system, first one capitalized, right? Funky little names, but that's their name. Okay. So Bacillus anthrax, you don't hear so much about in the United States, right? But what are we worried about as far as the United States is concerned, because we don't vaccinate against it? People using it as a weapon against us, what we call bioterrorism, right? Using biology to terrorize. There was an incident, now it seems like forever ago, where some idiot sent it in the mail, right, and killed some people. And they described it as what? Anyone know? A white powder. Guess what that white powder was? It wasn't actually the bacteria. It was a form of the bacteria. The endospores. Yeah, it was the endospores. Millions upon billions of them will look like a white powder.
Doesn't the mail system like put them through a machine or something now?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they're actively guarding against that now.
There's a rumor, I guess, that they do. I'm just curious.
We could research it. You could research it, let us know. I would say, considering how big the mail system is, probably not. But I would say that
I was thinking maybe
some type of screening is probably done to a certain extent, right? Obviously, all of us, because of that, would be weary of white powder, right, in the mail, unless we order talcum powder or something. But you don't want to do that anyways, because apparently that's linked to cancer too. Living is linked to cancer, y'all. Cancer is your cells behaving badly. Why they do that can be any number of reasons. Cancer is big term for a whole lot of problems. So the spores are a dormant form of the bacteria. And so they can persist in the environment for very long periods of time. And then when inhaled or get into your body, like into your skin, they can cause the bacteria will germinate again and cause a really serious infection, even deadly. For some of those people, even with treatment, they died because it was so severe and it wasn't caught quite early enough. Direct contact too, right, with an animal that has it or something like that. The good news is in the United States, we've done a really good job of cleaning this up, right? So the spores aren't prevalent in the environment. The bacteria doesn't really grow in the environment, right? But the spores could be found. It's imported cases and when people travel that we see this, right? That we actually see cases in the United States with this. But lots of different animals can harbor the infection. So the next one, the concern here mostly is cattle in the United States. And the name for the genus that caused that infection in cattle was referred to as Brucella abortus. And then there's Brucella suzi, which suzi means pig. And the first one actually refers to goat, the melitensis. So at one time they thought all these Brucella were different species, right? So all the different ones they were getting from the different animals, from goats, from cattle, from pigs, dogs, and even cats. And you can kind of guess what it would cause in cattle by its name, abortus. It would cause them to abort, right? Which is why cattle ranchers here in the United States actively vaccinate and work really hard to keep their herds free of this infection. So I don't have that many vet techs in this class as my other one, huh? Anyone want to gander a guess and might know this one? It does start with a B. This is brucellosis, or undulant fever. This is another one on the list of bioterrorist agents that could be used against the United States. So you have to go through background checks to do research on this and work in those research labs at LSU. Because other entities could use this to wipe out our cattle herds in the United States. And it's a major food source for Americans, right? We're major beef eaters. Like, apparently we even smell like beef, some of us, because we eat so much of it. My Asian friends always tell me, like, you stink of beef. I'm like, you stink of Asian spices. You know, you really are what you eat, right? And it really can even affect your smell. So it doesn't cause abortion in people, and people can get this infection, but it is a bacterial infection. So you can get antibiotics and you can get treated, but of course, we're trying to improve vaccination and things like that. That's why we still study it. And there's so much we can learn from these things. It can get into the milk as well, right? And that is one of the ways that people can be infected, but that's also the way it can very easily spread in a herd because it can be direct contact with saliva with each other and stuff like that. Like I said, it can get into a cattle herd and wipe the whole thing out. They've actually, bison in Yellowstone National Park, it was endemic in that population too, so they've gone through several vaccination programs to vaccinate them, to protect them. And also because too, if they left the Yellowstone Preserve and they got onto a cattle rancher would shoot them on site because they didn't want them transmitting that to the herd, the brucellosis. And when you travel to other countries, especially countries that don't pasteurize their milk and stuff, you know, you risk this and other infections. And then sometimes not even infection because, again, your gut isn't used to the bacteria that's present there because you haven't been exposed to it because you've been drinking. So that's why sometimes when people go to other countries and they consume food that get really bad intestinal problems, is because you're not adapted to that environment, right? My ex-husband was in the military and was deployed to Afghanistan. They went into town one day, him and his buddies. Buddy is sugar fiend like me. And they had a soft serve ice cream machine. It said American ice cream. He was like, Cody was like, yeah, I want some of that, right? My husband was like, what are you doing? He's like, what? American ice cream? Dude, it's an American ice cream machine, right? It's a soft serve ice cream machine. Where do you think the milk they put into that machine came from? Not the United States. They're in Afghanistan. It came from the goat farm they passed down the road. They didn't need it, right? That group that was with my husband, thankfully didn't need it. The rest of them did. They all ended up in the infirmary and lost their ability to go into town anymore because they didn't do what they were told to do, which is not to eat certain things. But they got fooled, didn't they? Right? That whole American word? Yeah. Some of them bought it. Hook, line, and sinker. Right? So, you know, as we know these things, right, we can make educated choices. This next one is definitely for my vet tech majors because it's something you may experience. Another bacterial infection, the most common way it's transmitted to you, this bacterial infection, is via a cat or dog scratch. So guess what it's called? Cat scratch fever. Yes, cat scratch disease. Anyone know how it's transmitted between cats and dogs? There's a vector actually involved in this one. Some little biting thing they have. So like stray cats, right? Feral cats don't actually want you to pet them, by the way, right? We know this. Little kids don't necessarily know this. So I have to tell my son all the time, for the ones that lived in the abandoned house next door, leave them alone, right? By some chance, if he got close enough, right, which usually isn't the case, right, do not touch them, right? They're covered in fleas, even though they've done a program in New Orleans where if you ever see a feral cat, they've got their ear, one of their ears cropped off. It's like flat. That's to indicate it's been fixed, spayed or neutered, right? So try and vaccinate. But they do not do flea preventive, right? How?
Well, if you have like a colony, someone taking care of the colony.
Right.
Yeah,
the little lady that came by and fed them. What did she put in the food?
There's pill forms that you can put in.
The food. I'm pretty sure the ones next to us had it though. There's a nice little lady that came and gave them food and water, you know, like every day. But yeah, no, not messing with that. But you know, that's how it's transmitted. And then they'll have the infection, you won't even know it, right? And so the most common way you're going to get it is from a scratch. But if you already have a wound and you come in contact with the saliva or even the fleas or the flea poop, right, and it gets into a wound you have, then you could get it. Again, treated very easily with antibiotics. I think it's gram-positive, so penicillin-type drugs, no problem, cheap. It's recognizing it. A lot of times it'll cause the lymph nodes, or what you call your glands, in your armpit regions to swell. So if you work with animals, right, and you get lumpy armpits, right, don't think you have breast cancer. Don't let your doctor think you have breast cancer. Explain to them you work with animals, right? And then, maybe look into maybe is it cat scratch before are doing like breast biopsies. Craziness. All right, so arboviruses, so these are viruses carried by things like mosquitoes, fleas, ticks, right? And most of us, the one that we talk about most here, right, that's transmitted by the mosquito vector, what are we worried about? What viruses are we worried, arboviruses are we worried about here in Louisiana? West Nile, right? And then, of course, we're a little bit freaking out about Zika, but don't, right? The good news is the particular mosquito is very easy to trap and kill that causes West Nile. And they do that. There's a whole program in Louisiana for that. If you notice the mosquito truck is coming by more often, then there were positive results in the traps near your house. FYI. Clean out those stagnant containers and stuff around your house at least once a week. Like when we have rain, and if you have plant pots or old tie, dump them.
That's what that loud truck.
Yep, the loud truck that sprays stuff out the back. Yeah, it's
I'm not from Louisiana, so when I came down and saw this truck spraying, I'm thinking, what's going on?
Yeah, go in the house.
I'm from up north, and people just have to weird not saw that truck.
Yeah. I was raised in Massachusetts. I've had an adjustment period too. My mom was from the South. It was too freaking cold up there for me.
I didn't trust the planes in the sky to spray stuff.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's mosquito trucks. So, look at the name. Gives you a clue, right? So this is another one for my vet tech majors usually. Well, this one's interesting though because the guy who first described it, Anthony von Leeuwenhoek, he was looking at his own poop. So this is the protozoa one. This is Giardia instantalis. Sometimes you'll see Giardia vaginitis because it can cause an infection of the vagina as well as of the intestines. But again, turns out same organism, right? Not actually two different species, but you'll still see the other names sometimes. So this is Giardias. Usually get it from contaminated water. A lot of people are carriers. Animals are carriers for it. But you can get a pretty serious infection, and there are drug treatments for it. Lots of animals have it. But most of us, again, this is a thing where we know, like, you're not going to go, never mind, City Park, you're not going to go drink out of the pond, right? Heck, most of us don't even drink New Orleans water out of the bubbler. Do you call it bubbler? Water fountain?
You call it both?
You know, the water fountain.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. No. Where I grew up in what do you call it?
I was like, I don't even call it that. I'm from here.
You don't call it what? Bubbler. No, bubbler is a thing I learned in the Northeast. That's why I was wondering because when I first got here, I was like, where's the bubbler? They were like, I was like, the thing that water comes out and you drink. Oh, the water fountain? Oh, okay. The water fountain. I don't drink out of those.
I'm from Ohio, from really far.
Oh, yeah. I'm from Massachusetts, so New England area. Oh, yeah. Ohio? Cool. Too cold, those places, or? Oh, that's north. I'm southern. Yeah, I was in Monterey when my husband was in training. That was freaking cold. Yeah. Sacramento. Cool. Hot. Yeah, it is different degrees of cold, right? We have the wet cold.
That's what makes it really cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it snows is when it's cold.
Yeah. But you know what? It's actually somewhat warmer than it is here at the same temperature.
New York for 8 months. I know the difference.
Yeah, it's really crazy how climate can affect. So the good news is that being in Louisiana right now, this next one isn't really so much to worry about, but because of, how the world is and how the world works these days, things can travel very easily, right? And so it's a good one to duly note because, again, with viruses, I don't think we've talked about just yet, we already said you can't take antibiotics. We do have some antivirals, but for the most part, what saves you, literally your life sometimes, when you have a viral infection? What in your body?
Oh, the bacteria. No.
A whole system in your body is your guard and your protection and your fighting army, your immune system. Yeah, really. Yeah, pretty much what saves you. Right? So things like this, like, will support you as best you can and pray that the immune system takes care of the problem. So that's kind of frightening about things like this. So this is it was known as a syndrome at one time because, so of course this one's pretty cool, like the name of the organism is like the name of the disease, right? So this is hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. At one time it was this list of symptoms, right? And they called it hanta. They knew it was probably a virus, right? But they hadn't completely pinpointed it at that time. That's where the syndrome part of the name. And of course, pulmonary, it affects your lungs. I see you guys fidgeting. See, I can read cues because I have no concept of touch. Okay, so this one can be spread by contact with saliva, urine, or feces of deer mice and aerosolized viruses. And then, of course, the fleas associated with these mice apparently can be a source of infection. The good news is this is a problem like Arizona, that arid type region part of the United States. But it can show up in other places, warehouses that have like your canned goods that may be shipped here. The dust on the top of them may contain, and even if you don't see dust. So one of the general rules as far as canned goods go, because you don't know exactly maybe where it came from and some little mousey might have ran over the top of it and peed on it and you don't know, is to wipe the top of the can down if you don't intend on cooking the contents. Right? So if it's a can of peaches and you're just going to eat it right out of the can, which is totally cool, wipe the can, right? Because when you open it with that can opener, you're going to introduce those things into that food source. So that's a good protect yourself and know, like, certain things are regional. So the next one is regional. You should get this one. And this is not Borgafo, but Borgafai, right? This should be an I and not an O. And when I started to say it, I was like, the other day, I was like, I know it's an I, but then I was like, maybe it's not an I. No, it is I. Borrelia burgdorferi is transmitted by ticks, right? And mostly deer ticks. Any guesses? Lyme disease. Lyme disease. And again, very rare in Louisiana right now. Do we have deers, though? Do we have deer? Do we have deer ticks? Yeah, absolutely. Is there a possibility this bacteria will get here and we could have a serious problem with it? Absolutely. Right? And it's spreading. If you look at the map on the CDC's website, it's spreading, right? Because especially in the Northeast, it's getting very crowded, right? And we're pushing in. And before they started, which they've done a pretty good job of creating nature reserves for animals to exist without people, that they have places so that we're not keep pushing them, right? Because as we keep expanding, we keep pushing them, right? And so then their areas expand, and guess what they bring with them? Their disease, right? So in the Northeast, you vaccinate, at least in New England area. Lyme is actually a place in Connecticut where it was discovered. That's where it gets the name. We vaccinate our cats and dogs against this because it's pretty prevalent. Yersinia pestis. Anyone know what that is? This is another bacteria. Most of them are bacteria except for Giardia, or a virus if it says it. Plague. Yeah, this is like, you're like, why is she talking about plague? That's like, they talk about it in the 1300s in your book, right? It's still around today, right? But most of us know how to avoid it. Most of us live in habitats where we're not going to be exposed to the rodents and their fleas, right? And you can get a pneumonic form of this where you inhale it and respiratorily transmit it, which is really frightening. So this was actually, we worried too at one time that it might become a problem here in New Orleans after Katrina, where rodents were taking up residence in abandoned homes, and then people were going to clean out and they weren't wearing protective gear, and you had the mice dropping. Even if the mice were out, you had their droppings and maybe even some of their other things left behind. That's not something you should do on your own, right? Leave that to the professionals, right? Or wear protective gear, definitely. Wear protective gear. Again, there's pockets of it throughout the United States, right? Where this bacteria exists, the rodents are there, the fleas are there, it gets transmitted.
One thing like protective be like with the doctors having masks on that
Mhm.
for those who want.
Or even like those dust masks you can buy at like Home Depot and Lowe's and things like that.
Maybe one downside is that after like 5 minutes of breathing into it.
It's soaked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, especially in Louisiana, you'd be changing it like every 10 minutes, depending on the weather. Like you know that winter was a couple weekends ago. That's pretty much it.
I
great.
got February right on the corner, so
I don't know.
always a chance to sneak up on it.
Yeah, like it's a little chilly today, but it's not bad. So the last one, I covered up the etiological agent because it would give you the answer, but I realized I really didn't cover up all the answer because rabies. Right, and again, we know where this comes from, but do you know the major offender in Louisiana? Raccoons and bats. But people come in more contact with raccoons, so stay away from those guys. They carry rabies. All right. We'll pick up where we left off on Wednesday.